So far in the story of Jesus, we've been following Mary, Jesus' mother. But when we turn to the book of Matthew, we see that it follows Jesus' adoptive father, Joseph. Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, this is how Jesus the Messiah was born. His mother Mary was engaged to be married to Joseph. But before the marriage took place, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her fiancé, was a good man and didn't want to disgrace her publicly, so he decided to break the engagement quietly. Joseph, New Living Translation, says was a good man. The NIV, RSV, King James, says he was a righteous man. Joseph was righteous, just like Zechariah and Elizabeth was righteous. Righteous people surrounded the birth of Jesus. Being righteous, Joseph wanted to follow the Mosaic law. His heart was breaking because his fiancée was pregnant, and he knew he was not the father. Now you know the full story. You know that as Joseph was cringing inside over what he perceived to be a betrayal by Mary, an angel appears to him and says, Joseph, take Mary, because the child that is in her is from the Holy Spirit. Joseph wakes up from the dream that he has, and he says, okay. Kind of shows you a little bit of Joseph's character. He knew God's voice when he heard it, and when he heard it, he obeyed. The angel said, something has happened that has never happened before, something that will change the entire course of human history. And Joseph, you're at the center of it. And Joseph wakes up and says, all right. And he took Mary. Now, up to that point, they were betrothed. We, in our culture today, we have a system of marriage that's very simple. We go to the courthouse, we get a marriage license, we go to the pastor, he does a ceremony, and there is an actual date that everybody knows that we're married. In Jesus' time, it wasn't quite that way. When a young man and a young woman decided to be married, they did not yet come together as man and wife. But what happened is that the man began to build the house that they would live in. That would typically take up to a year. During all that time, they were betrothed, but they would not be married until the house was finished. Joseph's house was not yet finished. He was betrothed to Mary, and yet they had not yet come together. To separate from Mary would still require a bill of divorce. Joseph decided to give her that bill of divorce, but to do it privately, to not shame her in public. You know the story. We've read the story. Joseph takes Mary. The very end of the first chapter says, he did not have sexual relations with her until her son was born. Joseph named him Jesus. Joseph and Mary came together after Jesus' birth. They had other children in the book of Mark. Mark chapter 6, verse 3, we hear about those siblings of Jesus. The crowd scoffed at Jesus. They said he's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and his sisters live right here among us. He had 4 brothers and an unnamed number of sisters. The interesting thing is that of those siblings that he had, 2 of them, James and Judas were also leaders in the early church. James is probably the author of the book of James, and Judas is the author of the book of Jude. Now, is it by accident? Is it nepotism that caused these two siblings of Jesus to be leaders in the early church? I don't think so. I think rather Joseph and Mary were such parents that their children rose to leadership in the new church. It makes sense to me if God was going to look throughout all time, all history, for parents for his own son, that he would pick someone like Joseph and Mary. They raised their other children well. They certainly raised Jesus well. Tomorrow, we'll continue to look at what happened after Jesus was born.